Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host Didi, and joining me today once again is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be reviewing the F1 Zandvoort GP. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions, and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant. Finally, a normal race weekend this season. Fans are saying it was a boring race, comparing it to Monaco. But what were your thoughts on it?
Well, see, I'll be honest, I didn't watch the entire race because I had family dinner. But on the face of it and the half that I watched, it looked quite interesting. Obviously, we knew going in that it was a narrow track and with a lot of undulations, and it was not, and a very short track. So it was never going to be easy to overtake and even try to make moves, right? But still, as we saw, Sergio Perez made up a lot of places, and the fight between Max versus both the Mercedes. So it was quite an interesting race all in all.
I thought it was pretty exciting. I think people aren't exactly right when they compare it to Monaco. It was more like a race at Mugello. It's a narrow circuit, but the drivers love it, and all the drivers, were really happy about having come here to Zandvoort.
Absolutely.
If the fans were a little bored, it's only because the entertainment standard from Formula One is just so high this year. The entertainment value has been off the charts, considering everything that has happened this season so far. But for me, at least, from a strategic point of view, from all the different storylines playing out in the field and everything, for me it was a really exciting race. I was glued to my screen for the entirety of it. It seemed a little long, 72 laps around that place, but it was the same Grand Prix distance. But bring back Zandvoort in 2022. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, Max now leads the Drivers' Championship by 3 points, while Mercedes leads the Constructors' Championship by 12 points with 10 races to go. Hopefully, we'll get all 10 races that are remaining. But hey, like I said at the start of the season, the 3 points from each of the sprint races, they'll count, and it's 3 points that Max leads the championship by right now. So don't discount the sprint races, especially as we head into Monza next weekend. But anyway, we're here to talk about Zandvoort, so let's dive right into it. Mercedes didn't have the pace this weekend, but I guess the questions coming out of this weekend for Mercedes is, could they have given Lewis a better chance at the win? And when I say that, I'm asking whether, especially regarding the second stop. Now, Mercedes made a mistake where they pitted Lewis a bit too early, and he came out in traffic, and he hadn't really used his his set of mediums, his first set of mediums during the race, and there's still a lot of life left there. So, could they have done a better job there? And would it have changed anything? Do you think would Lewis have won had Mercedes not, pitted him that early?
I don't think the result would have been any different, honestly, because Lewis pitted first. Even on their second stops, Lewis pitted first, and immediately Red Bull covered him. It was not like Red Bull was playing its own plan, right? Red Bull covered Lewis as soon as they could, like on the next lap itself. So had Lewis stayed longer, Max Verstappen would still have covered him on the very next lap. So I think the result would still have been same. The excitement and the chase would have maybe been better, but yeah.
I absolutely agree with you there, Vedant. I think Lewis would have been much closer to Max had they waited another 3-4 laps for Lewis to come out in fresh air just like Max did. But other than that, I don't think it would have affected the results at all. What about the tire choice? I think we'll come to the same conclusion that it wouldn't have changed anything. But I think Lewis was complaining that he should have been on the hard tires when he went on the second set of mediums, and he was kind of unhappy with the team after Max was able to pull out a gap between himself and Lewis for most of the second stint towards the end of the race on that hard tire. Do you think that would have been a better choice, or do you think that was a gamble that played off for Max Verstappen but might not have paid off for Lewis Hamilton had he gone on the hards?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because as I said, during the second half of the race, I was just following it, like reading stuff. So I am not entirely sure what the performance exactly was.
I guess that is true. But in my opinion, I think going on the hards for Lewis Hamilton would have been a gamble just as much as it was for Red Bull, since none of the teams really ran the hard tires in practice, and we saw both the Ferraris, when they switched to the hard tires, both had different levels of performance. Where while Charles, absolutely excelled on the hard tires and maintained pace with Pierre Gasly out in front, Carlos dropped a lot of time, and he was like 25 seconds behind Charles at the end of the race and was finally overtaken by Fernando Alonso. But regardless, I think, a decent weekend for Lewis. He did all he could to put it on P2 on the front row of the grid and then drove a clean race. But coming on to Valtteri Bottas, obviously there's much more news coming out from his side this weekend, but we'll get to that later. What do you think about the weekend for Valtteri? He qualified P3, finished P3. I don't think Mercedes could have asked for more from Valtteri. And I think overall it was a good weekend. He did his job. He picked up the points, and now Mercedes are ahead in the Constructors' Championship by a little more than they were after Belgium.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you summed it up, right? He did his job. That's the 4 words we need Valtteri Bottas for at the moment. Because every other race, like every race he crashes out or something, he's not there, right? In the wet or everywhere else. And when he is performing at his best, he is doing his job, and which is to help help Lewis Hamilton win the championship and hold back Max Verstappen.
Yeah,
so
but
absolutely.
But was that all that Valtteri was supposed to do? Do you think, did Valtteri the wingman do all he could to have, did Valtteri the wingman do all he could having to hold up Max Verstappen? Fans didn't think to see. Fuck, एक second. ये edit कर लेना, ठीक है? But do you think Valtteri the wingman did all he could to hold up Verstappen in the race, or could he have done more and held up Max Verstappen for a little bit longer for Lewis to catch up? The fans didn't seem to think so. Fans were of the opinion that Valtteri didn't put up a fight as much as he could have. But in my opinion, obviously he made a mistake. He went wide, and then it was a piece of cake for Max Verstappen to overtake him on the straight. But I think Valtteri did a decent job. He held up Max for like a lap and a half, and Lewis was 3.5 seconds behind Max. And by the time Valtteri let Lewis through, Lewis was just a second and a little bit. I think a second and 2/10 behind Max Verstappen. So I think Valtteri did pretty well. Could he have done more? He can always do more. But in my opinion, it was fine. What did you think of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he held Max Verstappen all he could, right? And see, the pace of the Red Bull was just too good for Mercedes, and that's why Max Verstappen had the better on Valtteri Bottas. But also, when Valtteri Bottas let Lewis Hamilton go, and it was a pretty good point because Valtteri Bottas didn't lose, Lewis Hamilton didn't lose a lot of time in that.
He didn't lose any time at all.
Exactly. So I think the position which Valtteri Bottas chose to let Max Verstappen make that overtake and to let Lewis Hamilton go was, I think, an intelligent decision in a way.
Absolutely. It was funny to hear Lewis complain about how Max was getting lucky with the traffic and he couldn't get lucky with the traffic, especially when he had a teammate, vouching for him and holding up Max Verstappen for him. So a little bit funny there, but it's just Lewis being Lewis, complaining about his tires and the traffic and everything he can possibly during the race. But talking about Valtteri, what did you think about the cheeky fastest lap effort by Valtteri? James Vowles had to come on the radio and ask. I think it was towards the end of the race, so you probably missed it. But in case, so James Vowles had to come onto the radio and ask Valtteri to not go for the fastest lap so that Lewis could pit and take the fastest lap on the very last lap of the race. But Valtteri, before that, put in 2 purple sectors and then let off right in the 3rd sector, and just enough so that Lewis didn't have to push too hard to get the fastest lap, which he did in the end. But pretty cheeky from Valtteri, and in the post-race interview, Valtteri's like, "Oh, I was just playing around with them," and I think it was just fun to see Valtteri having a little bit of fun before announcing his move to Alfa Romeo, which again we'll talk about towards the end of this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard about it and when I read about it, I was like, I mean, why is this guy doing? Why is he playing the team game as such? For one more point, while he is in a fight himself for the P3 in the championship. But I guess looking back now with the news in mind, I think it was a healthy, teammate stuff.
I mean, regardless, but for people who think that Valtteri shouldn't have played the team game or wouldn't play the team game just because he's moving away from Mercedes, or even if he stays at Mercedes. I don't think Valtteri is in a position, P3 does not entitle him to anything in the championship really. So
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
at the end of
That's
the
true.
day, we've seen Valtteri give up wins and points, even when he's been in a position to contend for the title halfway through the season. We've seen Valtteri do that. We've seen Mercedes ask Valtteri to do that before. So that's not surprising that he plays the team game. But it was just really really fun to see Valtteri poke at Mercedes a little bit and make them nervous towards the end of the race. It's always it's always an event when James Valls comes on the radio for any of the drivers,
Yeah.
especially for Valtteri Bottas. Uh, but yeah, that was all for Mercedes. Not a lot to talk about there. But Red Bull beat Mercedes on pace. For me, Max was the driver of the day, or driver of the weekend. Scintillating drive from him both on Saturday and Sunday. Qualified first, even after he had issues with the gearbox out of turn 3 and the DRS remained closed out of the final corner. So he probably lost 2.5 tenths there, and he only outqualified Lewis by like 400ths of a second at the end of qualifying. But what a drive from him, and he did everything he could. He covered Lewis. He didn't make a mistake. He navigated through traffic better than Lewis could, and then he also, he basically battled two Mercedes to take that win, and that couldn't have been easy. Regardless of how long he was behind Bottas, he had to make that move. He had to make those hard tires last, and he was up against a 7-time world champion, pressuring him throughout the race. So definitely my driver of the day.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Max Verstappen, as you have said, over and over again, this is the best season of his Formula One career, and he has just reached his peak. Obviously, he has a long career ahead, and the peak will continue. But he has just reached his peak, and it shows. And I think he broke the record of most wins without the World Championship. And I think within 10 more races, he would be a world champion. So yeah, absolutely dominant drive from Max Verstappen.
Absolutely, but on the other hand, kind of a split weekend for Red Bull as damage limitation from Sergio Perez this weekend. But understandably, people's driver of the day, as Mr. Sunday was making overtakes and making the race exciting for a lot of viewers across the globe. Terrible qualifying from Sergio Perez. Obviously, he got sent out into traffic, didn't time his run really well, which is why he couldn't get out of. I think it was Q1, was it?
Yep.
Yeah. Again, something to look at. I think it's happened before with Sergio Perez during the course of the season. I can't recall when exactly. But do you reckon that Sergio could have still finished P4 had he not flat spotted his first set of hard tires at the start of the race? Because if you remember, Sergio had to pit because of damaging his tires at lap 8, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was on the set of hards, right, which meant he was going for a long stint, and we have seen Sergio Perez do that a lot of time and successfully. He goes on a long stint. He makes that one stopper work very well for him, and I think it would have been a P6, like better than P6 finish, minimum. So
yeah, absolutely. And he had great pace in that. In the Red Bull, he was overtaking in places where we didn't think Formula One cars would be able to overtake each other. He was overtaking in the chicane. He was overtaking obviously out of turn 1, but he was able to follow the cars really closely and set up the moves well in advance. So that he didn't put a foot wrong, except that one battle that he had with Lando Norris where he hit Lando's front tire. And Lando, put his rear tire into his bodywork, chipping away some of that aero work on the floor. But other than that, from the team radio at least, it seemed Sergio was enjoying his drive from back of the grid to P8. I think that's what he finished. And I think he also made a comment when he overtook Lando that regarding Lando's, I think, video of him dressed up in a Mexican outfit, and I think Sergio Perez went on to say, that's what you get for dressing up as a taco during the summer break. So definitely some vindication there from Sergio Perez. But
I mean, they have had a few comings together in this season, right? In Austria, this weekend, and they are fighting for the P3 in the championship. So this is going to be an interesting, unlikely battle.
And Sergio Perez currently continue to set P5 in the championship, and we'll come to that later. But on the same note, I forgot to mention that Valtteri Bottas is in fact P3 in the championship now. Lando Norris slipped to P4 after what was a disappointing race this weekend for him. But before we talk about them, I have put Ferrari third in our list of teams that we're going to talk about. Usually we have McLaren up there, but Ferrari are 11.5 points ahead of McLaren in the Constructors' Championship as of now. Charles had a clean weekend, P5 to P5, absolutely scintillating in my opinion, didn't put a foot wrong. I was kind of worried that Charles would, send it into Pierre Gasly at the start of the race, and they did come close, because Valtteri had a bad start, and then I think it was Valtteri, Pierre, Charles, and Carlos nearly, side by side going into turn 1, and then the complex of turn 2 and turn 3. They were pretty close to each other, so that was a little on the edge. But really, over the weekend, nothing separating the two drivers except the fact that Carlos really struggled in his second stint with the hard tires. And that is what made all the difference between Carlos finishing P5, but in the end, being overtaken by Fernando Alonso and finishing P6. P7. P6. Yeah, he finished P6. But, could Charles have pitted earlier to challenge Pierre Gasly for P4? Because if you recall, on the first stint when both Pierre and Charles were on the soft tires, Charles closed the gap to Pierre, and it was I think it was below 2 seconds, and that is when AlphaTauri decided to pit Pierre around the 20th lap, which is pretty early even on the soft tires because the window was between, I think, 25 and 30 laps. Basically Charles forced Pierre to pit, and then they decided to go long. Do you think had they pitted earlier, they could have chased down Pierre and made that overtake at the end of the race? Or during the course of the race?
Well, I don't know, because the undercut didn't seem to work quite well all in all, but yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure it would have worked, especially since I think from what Jensen Button or what the commentary team told us during the course of the race, the car had to be almost 2 seconds faster than the car in front to manage an overtake during the race. So it's kind of unlikely that they would have been able to do that even if Charles would have pitted at a different point in time compared to Pierre Gasly. But all in all, a great weekend for Ferrari, whereas on the other hand, McLaren had a disappointing weekend, especially for Lando Norris. Daniel did play the team game and helped McLaren and Lando score that one lone point and helped Lando continue his points streak through the season. But disappointing weekend for McLaren. What can they take away from this weekend specifically? Because we still have a couple other tracks like Brazil that might be. I'm not going to say exact. It's not going to be the same as Zandvoort, but they're pretty similar in terms of the kinds of corners they have, and the way the track is set up.
I think the first real issue with McLaren came when Lando Norris was not in the top 10 in Q2, right? Because the crashes in Q2 meant that Norris was eliminated, and it was pretty surprising because throughout the season we have seen Lando Norris be in that top 10 bunch throughout qualifying, not just in Q3 and Q2, but throughout qualifying. So that was pretty surprising, and obviously that meant he would start P13 or P14, and that obviously made his race harder, and bringing home a single point was good. He was running P9 in the end, I believe, and then Sergio Perez overtook him. So in that regard, it was a decent recovery for Lando, but I think the trouble started in qualifying itself.
What do you reckon about Daniel Ricciardo? He did technically out-qualify his teammate, and it did seem even throughout qualifying that Daniel Ricciardo was just a little bit more comfortable in the car compared to Lando Norris around the circuit, But and Daniel Ricciardo didn't have the race pace wasn't too different compared to Lando Norris. He did have some engine troubles during the first few laps of the race. I think his engine was losing oil and it was smoking, so maybe he lost a bit of time because of that. But do you think Daniel Ricciardo is getting more comfortable in that car, or is it just Lando Norris having a bad weekend and we haven't seen the pace offset that we usually see between the two of them?
No, I mean I genuinely think Ricciardo is getting more comfortable see, this was a new circuit for everyone, and while like while Daniel Ricciardo is struggling with the car to go on a new circuit, it obviously makes it quite difficult, I suppose. But if I heard the team radio afterwards on YouTube, and I think during the last 10-15 laps, Ricciardo was lapping as the same pace as Lando, and I mean Ricciardo had older tires, so I think that just shows that he is comfortable and he is driving correctly and doing the right things. It's just that the track and the situation got him out.
Absolutely, and we'll come back to McLaren when we look forward to next week towards the end of this podcast. Now talking about Alpine, they had a great points haul once again, and they're now sitting in P5 in the Constructors' Championship, 6 points ahead of AlphaTauri. Fernando is back ahead of Esteban Vedant, and you should be celebrating that in the Drivers' Championship, and rightly so. And especially after this weekend, I felt Ocon could learn a few more things from Fernando, especially the way Fernando manages tires throughout both his stints, to take P6. While Esteban was pushing on his new tires, Fernando was playing the long game. Now, you could argue, essentially, that Esteban was pushing behind his teammate and he was maybe not allowed to overtake Fernando during the course of the race, which is why he made a bad decision and burned his tires. But again, had he learned from Fernando and did what Fernando and copied what Fernando did, basically, he might have finished P6 and overtaken, had the opportunity to overtake Carlos towards the end of the race too. But what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, firstly, while Fernando Alonso has taken the lead, is better placed than Ocon after this round, it almost didn't happen. The turn 3 incident behind Carlos Sainz, I mean, that would have been devastating for me. But yeah, it didn't happen, and Fernando Alonso lives. I mean, he is ahead of Ocon. So yeah, obviously, as you said, Alonso was always going to play the long game, even on the team radio when Esteban said, "See, I'm quicker and I need to be led by." Alonso said, "Hey, I can be quicker. I'm just saving my tires for later."
And then he went on to put 6 seconds behind him between himself and Esteban Ocon over the course of the next 10 laps on his first stint. But yeah, the Alpines did come really close on the first lap, and a lot of times even during the race, it was pretty close. But all in all, a great points haul from Alpine. And I think we've said this time and again that they seem to be in the best position to consolidate that P5 as we move deeper into the second half of the season. And it just seems that is becoming more and more true as we go on. Talking about AlphaTauri, split weekend for them too. Gasly finally delivered to his and the car's potential. We've been talking about. I don't think we've talked enough about how well Gasly has done in qualifying. Obviously, he's been Mr. Saturday just as much as George Russell this season, if not more. But his race pace, I wouldn't say it wasn't that great, but it was more inconsistent, and there was always something going wrong with that team. Whether it was strategy, whether it was people crashing into Pierre Gasly, something always went wrong, and Pierre would never finish in the top 6 or top 5. But finally, he had a lonely race in P4. He was pressured a little by Charles, but I think I don't think they could have asked for more, and I hope Pierre can carry this form into the rest of the season and really show what that AlphaTauri car is made of, that we've been talking about, especially since the very beginning of the preseason test.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, having achieved your best result of the season, and then we are going to Monza next race, where Gasly won last season. So it's obviously he would love to carry that momentum forward, and he might not be able to defend his win, retain his win as such, but obviously he would want a good result in Monza, and relive those emotions in a way.
Yeah, it was.
But as you said, AlphaTauri finally especially Gasly finally had a good weekend. But yeah, mixed results for Yuki Tsunoda.
Yeah, mixed results for Yuki Tsunoda, having a disastrous weekend out in Q1 while his teammate put it P4 in Q3, and then I think it was a DNF for Yuki Tsunoda in the race. So pretty disappointing for him. And we'll talk about him when we have a little silly season chat towards the end of this podcast. So let's hold off on that. But Aston Martin, I think I wrote in our notes, Spinella returned in the race after being impeded by his adopted son Mick Schumacher and his evil stepbrother Nikita Mazepin. Disappointing race from both Aston Martins. They were off the pace in qualifying and the race after having looked good in practice. But hopefully Monza will be, a better place for them. Maybe they didn't get the setup right. I don't know what was going on with those cars, but they were definitely stuck behind, Williams and the Williams and the Alfa Romeos, and all the other cars in the lower midfield. Couldn't really make an overtake or challenge for any places. So kind of disappointing there. And now they're way off in the fight for P5 in the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Lawrence Stroll would be on the team right now because the amount of money they have invested, and to bring in Aston Martin to invest that kind of money in Formula 1, it was a big ask. And right now, they are not delivering. And I mean, they had to build up on the promise of last season, right? They did not do that. Yes, there were floor changes. Yes, there were this and that. But to be so far behind AlphaTauri and Alpine, yeah, it's pretty difficult for them. But they have a good team when Seb Vettel and the engineers behind him. Obviously, Lance Stroll is pretty consistent when he can be. So they can always improve, and it's always upwards from here. But right now, they need to look at themselves, I guess.
Yep. Well, let's talk about Williams now. After a double dhamaka, like we said in our last podcast for Williams, it was a double disaster in qualifying for both cars. And it seemed like Nicholas Latifi was somewhat on pace with George Russell in qualifying this weekend. I think he was setting P14 or P13 in Q2 while George Russell was in P11, and it seemed both the Williams could have made it into Q3 had gotten their final runs in without crashing out. So, not great there. But similar luck in the race, they showed promising pace, but I think George Russell had tire issues. He had a puncture or something. And then Nicholas Latifi didn't really have a great race either.
Yeah, there's nothing much to say, right? They would have wanted that momentum from Hungary and Spa to move forward, and they did show pace, as you said, but yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Was
Alfa Romeo.
Lackluster week.
Alfa Romeo, on the other hand, Giovinazzi drove to survive. He was driving to survive, putting at P7 in the qualifying, which was absolutely scintillating to see Antonio Giovinazzi do that. But then he went on to bin it in the race as he had a bad start, dropping 3 places at first and then falling off the face of the earth, basically, nowhere in the race like he usually is. Really disappointing about that. And I think I've said before, I don't really see Giovinazzi on the grid, next year. But again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. On the other hand, great return for Robert Kubica. Very short notice, but he was my top contender for driver of the day after having not put a foot wrong throughout Saturday and Sunday. I guess my question to you is, will he also be in the seat at Monza since Kimi got tested positive for COVID-19, was it Friday night or Saturday morning? And then Robert Kubica was put in that seat. So if it's a 10-day quarantine, I think it'll be Robert Kubica in the seat in Alfa Romeo next weekend too.
Yeah, obviously it all depends on, firstly Kimi's health, and we wish him the best, speedy recovery. But also it depends on what the regulations are in Italy. And I think, most likely, Robert will drive in Italy, in Monza. And yeah, if Kimi is not there, it would be Robert. But yeah, as you said, pretty great weekend for him on such short
notice. Yeah,
short
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been difficult to get some words out on this podcast. But talking about Haas, the last team on the grid. Obviously, things hit a boiling point during qualifying at Zandvoort. Nikita was extremely angry after that incident, involving himself, Mick and Seb. And then I think after that, Mick went on to say that their relationship was beyond repair. at this point in time, which is really really surprising and somewhat concerning. But yeah, like you said, clashing teammates return to haunt Gunther Steiner. What are your thoughts on it? How do you see Haas managing this situation, considering the fact that the team might not even be Haas going into 2022? It might just be the Uralkali Formula One team.
I mean, see, putting two rookies with such contrasting personalities was obviously always going to be difficult. And yes, for Mick to say that their relationship is beyond repair in less than 1 year, it's quite extreme. I would say, but I mean, it was pretty scary. What in when Mick overtook Nikita on the outlaps, I think the team allowed Mick to do so, so it was pretty clear in a way. But in the race, Nikita almost touched Mick, and it would have been a disaster because it was start of the race and there were a few other cars around.
Yeah, and
So yeah,
I was unclear on why Nikita ended up retiring his car during the course of the race, and Mick ended up finishing in front of him anyway. But yeah, really surprising to see two teammates squabble over P19 in such a way, and really ruining their relationship and the way the team will work around them. But again, if I think Nikita made the comment that he doesn't like working with people who are cheeky, but at the end of the day, it is Formula One, and if you're a driver, you will have to be selfish. And if that means playing games with your teammates, we've seen friendships blow up in the past. We've seen rivalries blow up in the past, and we've seen the worst of it. But at the end of the day, the one who is able to look out for himself the best comes out on top. So if Nikita needs to be selfish after this, if he hasn't been already, then he might as well go for it, considering there's nothing left to repair. But yeah, that was all from my side about this weekend's review, Vedant. But all I have to say is I'm a huge fan. As I wrap up our review, is that I'm a huge fan of the Zandvoort circuit. The Carousel Corner, Turn 3 is one of my favorite corners on the circuit now. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And now we go from a cloud of orange to a sea of red next weekend. But you got to say, the Dutch fans are absolutely crazy with all their, the smoke and the everything. The absolute, the environment is just nuts. We had Armin van Buuren and Tiesto playing during the race weekend. So, a lot of EDM and techno. I think that'll be one of the circuits that will, and one of the races that will go up on my bucket list if it continues to be on the calendar for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Netherlands as a country itself, it's quite a place to visit. But yeah, Zandvoort. I mean, the cars are so close together, and if you get a good seat at turn 3 or the final corner, to see Formula One cars take on banking at that degree, it was extraordinary. And I mean, and to see them take multiple lines, or most of them were going quite high, but a few remained low, and to see that was quite interesting.
Definitely, IndyCar fans will be having a laugh watching F1 fans who've condoned bankings for so long to finally embrace them. But yeah, I guess the question is, I think Formula One said it was too risky to race around the Indy Oval because of the way the track is set up or whatever. But could Formula One consider racing on a short oval in the US in the future is my question. Because I think it'll be exciting. We saw Romain Grosjean race the short oval a couple of weeks back, and he had a pretty good race, and the race itself was really, really exciting. And given the success the Zandvoort circuit has had and the popularity that the final corner and turn 3 have with the fans now, could Formula One consider getting an oval race in at some point in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think ovals will come to Formula One anytime soon, because firstly the cars will have to be set up a lot differently, and as we see in IndyCar, and I mean, just the fact that it's only left turns, and no offense to any oval racing enthusiast, but just the fact that it's only left turns, and the fact that most of Formula One's current audience is out of the USA. I don't think anyone would want, any fans would want to see oval racing in Formula One. But as Formula One explores USA as a big market, and they want to, have a race in one random year, I think that won't hurt anyone as such.
Absolutely facts that. But yeah, that was all about the Zandvoort review. Now we're going to talk about the silly season, and you cannot start talking about the silly season without talking about Kimi's retirement from F1. Really heartbreaking. I was really sad when I heard the news. I didn't think I would be that sad, hearing about someone retire from F1, but Kimi did get me in the feels, I'd have to say. Last Ferrari F1 world champion, and there won't be a Ferrari world champion on the grid next year. The Iceman will be truly missed. Now, before I ask for your views and how you feel about the Iceman retiring, I'm just gonna put this out there. People often forget that Kimi was a prodigy, much like Max Verstappen. He was signed by Sauber in 2001, having raced in just Formula Ford Euro Cup, British Formula Renault, and Formula Renault UK Championships. Those were the only three championships, single-seaters championships that he raced in before coming into F1. He was referred to as the Eskimo internally, so that the other teams would not scout him and sign him after having lapped the Mugello circuit while testing for Sauber, and lapping the circuit half a second quicker than the Sauber F1 driver Pedro Diniz. So Kimi was a prodigy, and I don't think he's appreciated enough, especially with the new fans who have not known Kimi in his early career years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kimi Raikkonen did, I guess he only raced 20 odd races before his 20 odd single-seater races before his Formula 1 debut. And I think even Michael Schumacher or someone, and the Ferrari team were at Mugello at the time of his, first Formula 1 test. And even they commented on the speed of this youngster. But I think, as you said, the newer generation, and I believe even us, we never saw the peak Kimi Raikkonen, which was in his McLaren days from 2003, 4, 5 till he won the championship. And everywhere I read over the past week, everywhere it said that the peak Kimi was the Kimi of McLaren.
Yeah, but even when he came back to Lotus, he was blisteringly quick on a good day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was saying. It was a shame to see Kimi, it was a shame not to see Kimi at his best. And given the fact that how quick he was in the later part of his career, it would have been extra special.
Yeah, and it was just nice to see Kimi get that one last win for Ferrari in Kota before he switched to Sauber.
That was magical. That
was definitely massive. But yeah, what is your favorite memory regarding Kimi, Vedant? Hate to put you on the spot, but we have to answer this question, and I have my answer lined up, so I'm good here, but I'll throw it out to you.
I mean, there are many popular memories as such, all his radio comments and all that stuff. But I think two things strike out. Firstly, the fact that he almost bankrupted Lotus because of his, money per points contract. And secondly, I think it was in Interlagos where he went off and he forgot where the track was, and he was roaming around in the service lanes as such. So that was quite funny.
My favorite memory of Kimi isn't with him on the track or in the F1 paddock or anything regarding like that. But I remember my first ever F1 game that I got was on my PlayStation Portable. It was F1 2009, and the only driver I ever drove as was Kimi Raikkonen in that red Ferrari. Never drove as Felipe Massa, never drove as Fernando Alonso in the McLaren or Lewis Hamilton. It was always Kimi Raikkonen in that red car, and it's been like that throughout. But yeah, Kimi will be sorely missed. Although I'd be lying if I said I didn't see it coming. But it was surprising to learn the fact that Kimi decided that he'll be retiring last year in the winter. And this man, like always, kept quiet for 9 months before finally announcing his retirement to the world. But I don't think we've heard as many words as we have heard from Kimi after he announced his retirement as in his entire career. Yeah. He's been talking ever since, I've never seen Kimi, answer the press's questions so nicely and in detail. And it's just been weirdly wonderful to finally hear Kimi speak. And the way he talks about Formula One just goes to show that it is really a hobby for him and not a job like it is for other drivers like Sebastian Vettel or Lewis Hamilton. It's definitely just a hobby. I think Kimi pointed out the fact that initially when he signed for Sauber, he only intended to be in Formula One for a year and he wanted to do something else after that. But not only did he stay in the sport for so long and has become one of the most experienced drivers in Formula One.
The most experienced driver.
But he's loved doing it, and that is the only reason he stuck around for so long.
But I mean, you mentioned that F1 is his hobby, right? But I think people take it as a negative that it's just his hobby. But I think Kimi, explained it much better this week, that his life is around his kids and his family, and to stay after Ferrari these last few years, that was like an hobby. And now that his kids have grown up, and are like, his son has already started racing, and his daughter is now stepping into kindergarten or something. So I think now is the right time for him to relax and go back home.
Yep, and we shouldn't be surprised if we see on the Raikkonen in the ranks in the next 10 years or 15 years or so. Absolutely, we shouldn't be surprised. But enough about Kimi. Let's talk about the big news coming out this morning. Valtteri announced his move to Alfa Romeo this morning. And what are your thoughts on that? And I just want to point it out. This is the reason we never record our podcast until Monday afternoon or evening, because there's always some damn news coming out on Monday morning. And every time we have recorded our podcast on a Sunday evening, we've missed out on it, and it's always been weird after that. But yeah, anyway, what are your thoughts on Valtteri's move to Alfa?
I mean, we knew it was coming.
I wasn't convinced until like a couple of weeks ago. I think on the podcast I did say a few times I just don't see Valtteri going to Alfa. But obviously we did see it coming over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, see, Valtteri Bottas only had two realistic options as such, one at Williams and one at Alfa Romeo, and given the recent performance, like not this few races, but in a whole last couple of years, obviously Alfa Romeo would have stood out. And also that Frederick Vasseur was Kimi Raikkonen's a team principal in junior Formula when Raikkonen, I think, won the Formula 3 championship. So I think...
You mean Valtteri's?
Yeah, sorry, Valtteri's.
Yeah, he was his team principal in FP in
GP3
and FP when Valtteri won those championships. Yep.
So I think that just make that decision a whole lot easier. And yeah,
I think the decision sort of makes sense. Like I still thought that Williams would be a better fit for Valtteri, considering that Nicholas Latifi looks like he will carry on next year in the Williams seat, and Williams would have wanted someone with Valtteri's experience, especially from Mercedes, whom they share the PU with, to come into the team and take charge and lead the team from the front. But I guess Valtteri did like Sauber's project or whatever it is, Valtteri did like Sauber's project better than Williams, and that's why he signed with them. But I think from a professional standpoint, Valtteri is at a point in his career similar to where Kimi was when he was leaving Ferrari. Kimi was a great number 2 driver for Seb in the Ferrari, and I think he really helped Seb, finish as high as he could during the first couple of years. But I think 2019 being Kimi's last year in the Ferrari, 2018, I think, yeah. Yeah, 2018 being Kimi's last year in the Ferrari, he wasn't really there, to fight for the P2 or help Sebastian fight for P1. He would sometimes be there, and he would have mixed weekends. He wouldn't have as many crashes at Valtteri or anything like that. He was still more consistent, but he was off the pace. He would have a lonely P4 race compared to Valtteri helping Lewis, fight for that P1 in the championship. So, and I think that is where Valtteri finds himself right now in that Mercedes seat. So it's almost like a similar storyline from, professional standpoint, that Valtteri is moving to Alfa Romeo as his time, as a number 2 driver in the Mercedes comes to an end. So I think that kind of makes sense. But I hope Valtteri can make a difference in the Alfa Romeo seat, because we haven't seen Alfa Romeo make any sort of progress ever since Charles left that seat to join Ferrari in 2019.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's interesting that you bring that bring up that similarity between Kimi and Valtteri, because in the video that F1.com posted, Will Buxton said that exact same thing, that both are in the similar junction in their careers, but interestingly, both have chosen to go back to Alfa Romeo. And will Alfa Romeo become and continue to be a harbor for experienced and Formula One drivers who have passed their peak as such and want to just
I think
have a last couple of years? Will Alfa Romeo continue to be that?
I don't think that is the truth per se. I don't think that's the way to look at it. I think it's more the fact that Kimi and Valtteri are returning to Alfa Romeo speaks more volumes of the relationship that they share with Fred Vasseur than anything else about the team itself. It just speaks to what Fred Vasseur wants. But you talk about experience, but Kimi's been there for now 3 years. But I don't think Sauber has made a huge step in terms of performance with Kimi in that seat. So I'm hoping Valtteri can change that a little bit, and they can move up, because over the last 3 years, especially this year, I feel Alfa Romeo have stayed where they were in terms of performance. Yes, they have a good car, but neither of the two drivers have been able to extract it over the course of a race weekend. Whereas Williams have played the catch-up game, and they're almost in equal footing with Alfa Romeo in terms of performance, if not better, during qualifying and race day, especially right now in the championship. So that just goes to show that there is something lacking in Alfa Romeo, and hopefully Valtteri can turn that around as the leader in the group.
But yeah, I mean, another thing. Sorry to interrupt. Now that Valtteri is no longer in Lewis's shadow and no longer Lewis's wingman, I think we can see the Valtteri of past, the Valtteri of Williams, back. And I mean, I hope to see that, because Valtteri has been quick. It's not that he hasn't been quick. He was up against Lewis Hamilton, and he still outqualified Lewis a lot of the times, and he beat Lewis in races a lot of the times. So he's still quick. So I think with he can flare his wings better and fly higher, fly more freely as such in Alfa Romeo.
I guess psychologically it'll definitely be helpful for him not to be not to be confined to that number 2 spot in the team, and he can just do what he wants and not really worry about what the media has to say, what the critics have to say, and what the analysts and people like us who he calls like keyboard warriors have to say anymore, because he's in that alpha, and as long as he does good enough, he can be happy about it. But yeah, Valtteri moving to Alfa Romeo finally confirms the fact that George Russell is moving to Mercedes. So can we expect a 3-way or more championship fight in 2022, or am I counting my eggs before the hatch?
I think if it becomes a 3-way fight, George Russell has the talent and has the pace to make it a 3-way fight, right? But I think within that Mercedes lineup, I don't think either of them would let it become a 3-way fight as such. Obviously, one would be better, will cope better than the other. And I think that got me thinking, if after 4 races in 2022, if George Russell is leading the championship or is leading Lewis Hamilton by say 25 to 30 points, will Lewis Hamilton help George Russell win the championship, or will Lewis Hamilton want to claw those 30 points back?
I think he'll complain about his tires. That's what he's going to do.
That's exactly what I thought.
But I guess the $1 million question right now is who is getting those 3 seats between Alfa Romeo and Williams. The business triangle of Nick De Vries, Alex Albon and Toto Wolff does not seem to be getting any simpler. The fact that Mercedes is willing to move Nick from Formula E to Formula 1 after having just won the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships goes to show how little Mercedes care about Formula E.
Yeah.
But we need to remember the fact that Nick is a free agent. So for me, it's hard to understand why Toto Wolff is pushing for an F1 seat for Nick De Vries. considering he's not exactly a Mercedes junior or signed to the Mercedes F1 seat.
And I mean, being a defending champion for Formula E, and with with Mercedes in the final year next season, if he does not get a seat in Formula One for another season or whatever, he would want to find a seat in Formula E, and to do that he needs to defend his championship well. And I mean, for Nick De Vries, I think he should stay in Formula E. We know that Mercedes clearly have a good car, and it's not like they'll have to develop it too much, because the next season after that we'll have the new gen cars, right? So there won't be any competition as such, and they can still perform at the front. So I think Nick De Vries should stay there.
I mean, Mercedes is leaving Formula E, so Nick will have to find a seat there after the next season anyway. When the F1 season is halfway through next year. But
Yeah.
I mean, we know Nick has the beans to do it in F1. He didn't get a seat earlier on in his career, but he's proved himself through different categories,
Yeah, absolutely.
especially in Formula E.
Absolutely.
And he's been doing some endurance racing. But I still am not convinced that F1 is the place for Nick De Vries. I think Formula E, and I'm pretty sure a talent like him in Formula E will get picked up by another team. Although I should point out the fact that Nick De Vries, although he won the Formula E championship, he did not dominate it in any sense of the word. He got a bit lucky considering the way the championships panned out this season. It was Antonio Felix da Costa from 2 seasons ago. It was a little bit of a lucky break, but obviously he did put in the hard work and he did everything he had to do to win the championship. But I wouldn't say that he's the class of the field, or based on that performance, he deserves a seat in F1 per se.
Yeah, but I mean, as you said, a team like TS Cheetah and any top team in Formula E will be happy to bring in Nick De Vries after next season. So I mean, it's for Nick De Vries, it's a gamble between a backmarker team in Formula One, assuming that Williams maintain a similar trajectory next season, a backmarker team in Formula One, and potentially a top team in Formula E, where he can fight for wins and championships.
Yep, absolutely. But how do you see this, the seat thing panning out, or how do you want this to pan out? Who do you want in which seats? And what is the realistic solution that you see coming forth over the course of the next month and a half? Because from what we learned this weekend was the fact that Alex Albon was in talks with Williams to get that seat in Williams. But Toto Wolff was, I wouldn't say blocking that seat, but he was making a point that if Alex Albon wants to race at Williams, he will encourage Alex Albon to give up his Red Bull family ties and be a free agent basically in order to race for Williams, because they wouldn't want someone from a different junior program to be driving their power unit, which for me was a little weird considering the fact that we're heading towards a power engine power unit freeze at the end of 2022. So there's not much I feel Red Bull can really learn from that power unit, even if Alex Albon were to drive for it. And I don't think and I think Ferrari and Red Bull did come out after the race yesterday, and both Mattia Binotto and Christian Horner said that it was a bunch of bullshit that Toto Wolff was talking about, and it really didn't matter if a different junior program driver drove for a different team. So I really don't know what's going on. I think one theory that I floated to you earlier today was the fact that Toto Wolff might want the option of signing Alex Albon in the future as a Mercedes driver, considering he does have the beans, and we've seen that in Formula One. But it's a really far-fetched theory, as we discussed earlier today over WhatsApp. But how do you see this panning out, Vedant?
Well, see, as I said, while I want Nick De Vries to get his Formula One shot, and I mean, if he does get it, it would be great for both him and Formula One, because he is a driver of talent and he can take that Williams places, competitively. But I think between Nick and Alex, if you ask me, Williams might choose Alex, because firstly, Williams have shown interest in Alex more than Nick, and secondly, Alex has proven that he can be competitive in a Formula One car.
Yeah, he's a proven quantity in F1. Yep.
Exactly. I mean, yes, he had a difficult stint in Red Bull, but he had a brilliant stint in his first season in Alpha Tauri, and
It was Toro Rosso at the
Toro Rosso
time,
back
but yeah.
then, and the half season at Red Bull, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. So who do you see getting that seat in Alfa Romeo if Nick?
yeah, Alfa Romeo. See, I have always rooted for Antonio Giovinazzi to stay there, but and with P7 this weekend, who knows? He might have cemented that even more. But if they had to bring in a different driver, I think it would be very good if they could get in Theo Porcher because from Formula 2, because we know he is a top driver. We know he has he can be competitive in a Formula 1 car based on his performances in Junior Formula, and also with Valtteri Bottas he might have a good mentor. So and
Yep, absolutely. That is definitely a good point. But I think Fred Vasseur came out and said earlier in the weekend that they weren't looking to sign Theo Porcher for an F1 seat next season, and he could do with another season in F2, which is fair enough. Although he is leading the championship in F2 right now, I think 5 points ahead of Guan Yu Zhou after a few rounds. But I guess in that case, Nick De Vries wouldn't be a bad signing for Alfa Romeo if they were just looking to sign someone for one season and not have Antonio Giovinazzi in the seat. But then again, if they're just looking for a second driver for another season, why not have Antonio Giovinazzi there for another season and then phase him out basically as Antonio Giovinazzi takes up probably development driver responsibilities at Ferrari, or even get involved in the WEC program that Ferrari is running for the hypercars. So that is also an option for Ferrari, since Giovinazzi has been a development driver for Ferrari for pretty long. So that is another thing. And Theo Porcher can come in and take the seat in 2023 once Fred Vasseur feels he's ready for it. As far as Williams is concerned, I do think Alex Albon is the best option. But what Williams could also do is the fact that they could get both Nick De Vries and Alex Albon if they don't want Nicholas Latifi to be paying for that second seat in the team. However, from the conversations that Formula One has had with Toto Wolff, it seems that Nicholas Latifi will be in that seat because none of the team principals have mentioned two seats at Williams. They've just said that Alex Albon and Nick De Vries are competing for the same seat there. However, if I was Ferrari, I would take Mick Schumacher out of the seat in the Haas and put him in the Alfa Romeo next to Valtteri Bottas.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you summed it up pretty well. Theo Porcher is not leading the championship. He's sixth in the championship in Formula 2 right now. So that but other than that, I mean, you got it spot on, because Giovinazzi has been a Ferrari driver and he has raced in endurance racing with the AF Corsa team. So I think that would be a great opportunity for Giovinazzi to. Other than that, Williams getting in both Nick and Alex would be absolutely mental. I mean, it would be quite good. And with Jos Capito saying that they don't need paid drivers anymore, they can do without paid drivers from now on, it can be a possibility.
Yeah, although it does seem that Nicky has really good relations with the Williams team and the entire staff that is there. So obviously it's all speculation and we don't know what's happened. One last speculation regarding silly season, Vedant. How likely are we to see Yuki Tsunoda in Formula 1 next year? Now obviously Red Bull is famous for churning out drivers, but I want to make a distinction. This is not about Red Bull, this is about the drivers performing in AlphaTauri. We've seen, let's say, 3 different drivers in AlphaTauri over the last 3 years. We've seen Pierre Gasly do extremely well there, get promoted to Red Bull and still not do well there, but do extremely well in the AlphaTauri. We've seen Alex Albon do the same thing. Danny Kvyat came back to AlphaTauri and did decently well there. He wasn't lighting the world on fire like Pierre Gasly, but he was still doing pretty good. But Yuki Tsunoda has come into F1. It's been 12 races now, and he hasn't shown that he's gotten the beans yet. Now, obviously, we've heard commentators say that Yuki Tsunoda is just having the rookie season that most rookies have. We've just gotten used to some exceptional rookies like Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon, George Russell, and Lando Norris. However, Yuki Tsunoda hasn't done anything too bad. But considering the fact that most drivers are comfortable stepping up to that AlphaTauri car, is Yuki Tsunoda doing enough to keep his seat in 2022? Or can we potentially see Red Bull going for Liam Lawson or even getting Alex Albon back, which at this point seems kind of unlikely from the comments that we have heard from Christian Horner.
Yeah, once again, as you said, Liam Lawson and Alex Albon being back in AlphaTauri are not what we expect right now. Obviously, Liam Lawson, while he's having a good season, is still not leading championship or fighting for the championship as such in Formula 2. He is having a pretty decent, and I mean not pretty decent, extremely good DTM season, but that's beside the point. And Alex Albon, they wouldn't want Alex Albon back in AlphaTauri and make him fight for that Red Bull seat again. I don't think they want that as well. So Yuki Tsunoda might just hang on to that seat, but if you look at Yuki's performance alone, it's quite difficult. It's a borderline decision, and we know Red Bull can make their decision any time. They can make it mid-season, they can make it in December. So I won't be surprised if in December they announce something.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I won't be surprised if I'll be surprised if they announce anything regarding Yuki right now in the season. I think they'll wait until the absolute last race, like they did with Sergio Perez, and then they'll make a decision when they're required to. But yeah, that's all regarding the. This has been a long podcast, but that's all regarding the silly season. Now let's look at Monza ahead. Red Bull were the slowest in the speed traps this weekend, which doesn't exactly bode well, but that might just be because of the way they set up the car for the circuit Zandvoort, and that might not have anything to do with the way they're going to set up the car in Monza. However, from the recent mumblings we have heard coming out of the paddock, it seems that Mercedes have found some pace advantage in their engine. It doesn't seem to be exactly in line with the rules, which Red Bull and Ferrari have been talking about a little bit, but they definitely have a pace advantage there. So can we see, obviously I've told this time and again, Lando Norris is my favorite for a podium at Monza, but could we possibly see a Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas 1-2 in Monza if they can maintain a pace advantage compared to the Red Bull, or it's just a 50-50 call in your opinion, and we'll only know once qualifying gets underway on Saturday?
I mean, see, the fact that Mercedes have unlocked pace from their engine obviously makes them favorites as such, right? But at this point, in this season, I don't think there's a favorite anymore in terms of the car performance as such. On that weekend, the driver might perform better than his rival, but the cars, I think they are just 45-55.
Absolutely, and let's not forget the fact that qualifying this week, qualifying for Monza will be on Friday, sprint qualifying on Saturday, and the race on Sunday. So mark your calendars, don't make a mistake, don't miss out on qualifying while you're at work. Make sure to tune in. But that's all about F1. Vedant, I know you want to talk about FIA F3 a little bit, but before that, I'm just going to plug in about W Series. Shout out to W Series. The championship is level with Jamie Chadwick and Alice Powell on 109 points each. Alice Powell leads the championship as she has one more win than Jamie Chadwick. 3 for Alice Powell to 2 for Jamie Chadwick. And if you haven't been following W Series, now is a great time to join in as the championship battle comes to a close. I think there's only 2 more rounds left in the championship, so tune in, watch what happens, see if Jamie Chadwick can defend the title or not. And it's going to be an exciting last couple of races for sure.
We're talking about 2 more races to go and a very, very close championship battle. Let's move absolutely away from that, because in FIA F3, Dennis Hogger is leading the championship by 43 points, and there's only one race to go, one round to go, which means 3 races and some points for pole. But if you get pole on Friday, you won't be able to easily win race 1, right? So even though Jake Doohan and now Victor Martin can fight for the championship mathematically, I think Dennis Hogger has this thing wrapped up, and he just needs to dot the I's and cross the T's.
Absolutely, and it'll be exciting to see Dennis Hogger, contend for the title championship in F2 next year. Hopefully, he's been absolutely scintillating in F3. he's blown everyone away. And hopefully maybe he can do that in F2 and then finally make his way up to F1 in a couple of years' time, take that seat from Yuki Tsunoda. But, exciting prospect. And one last news, Callum Eilert will be racing for Junkers Racing this weekend in IndyCar, so watch out for that. Christian Langard raced in IndyCar, I don't remember for which team, but he raced in IndyCar the last time they went racing. So it seems like a lot of Formula 2 juniors will be moving or are looking to move to IndyCar as soon as possible. Logan Sargent, the only driver from the US that we have in F3, has also had a decent season so far, and hopefully we'll see him move to Formula 2 pretty soon.
But
that's all from my...
Yeah.
Sorry?
Talking about Callum Eilert, his IndyCar debut could not have come at a worse time, because had he been in Europe, he would have been the shot-in for Kimi Raikkonen's seat in these 2 rounds, right? So, Callum Eilert has been unlucky basically throughout his career, and it just goes on and on.
Absolutely. But yeah, that's all from my side, without any closing thoughts from you besides that.
No.
No, absolutely. I'm ready. I'm ready for the Sea of Red. I'm ready for the Tifosi on TV, and I'm ready to see some, Forza Ferrari being chanted throughout the weekend.
And now that you say it, the Tifosi, Carlos Sainz needs to get his weekend right, and he has admitted that. And Mattia Binotto has admitted that. I forgot it when we were talking about Carlos, but now that we are moving to Monza, I think it might be the best fairy tale homecoming for Carlos, that we have seen him, do well in races and do well in qualifying, but never a complete weekend. So yeah, hoping for that.
Yep. Hopefully we'll see that. Thank you, Vedant, for joining me once again today. It's been an hour and 8 minutes almost. So I'm going to let you go now, and we'll come back next weekend to discuss what happens in Monza. I am so excited for it. And guys, for those who are watching Motorsport, for those who are watching Formula 1, go watch W Series and go watch IndyCar as that season wraps up too. Pato O'Ward is leading the championship by just 10 points. So it's going to be really exciting to see the IndyCar season wrap up in a month's time. But yeah, that's all from my side, and we'll catch you all next weekend.